And this is one of the things that oftentimes, I said earlier, that the media sometimes just doesn't give you enough information to properly understand it. And over the last year, it's been very interesting to watch some of the reports because there's a lot of good information. I think probably they're doing a better job these days of trying to properly interpret that and report on that. But one of the things that I said that they often leave out that's very critical to understanding unemployment, the unemployment rate, is the labor force participation rate. On your worksheet, you guys are going to look up what a discouraged worker is, and that's a worker who's been unemployed, they've been looking for a job, they are willing and able to work. Because remember, when we do these statistics and we figure out if someone's willing and able to work, one of the things that we're going to do is try to assess how do we know they're willing. I mean, did they just say they're willing? We know they're willing, and one of the questions that they ask when they do the surveys to get those calculations is they ask if that person has been looking for a job, if they've actively sought employment. What happens when we have a long recession like we've had today, in these last couple of years, is some of those people have been looking for work and unsuccessfully. And so oftentimes they become discouraged and say, hey, why bother? Why get out there and just, go knocking on doors trying to find a job and there's just no jobs available? So those workers stop looking for work. Technically speaking now, they're no longer unemployed. And so the discouraged worker has an impact on the unemployment rate. So that's one of the ones that you're going to do a worksheet on and try to figure out what the impact is there. So what I want you to understand with unemployment is this. It's not such a simple thing. It's not just, unemployment up, that's bad. Unemployment down, that's good. It's not that simple. There's a certain balance that you want to have. I mean, think about that. Sometimes if your blood pressure is too high, that's not good. If your blood pressure is too low, that's not good. We're looking for the right amount there. And that's what I referred to in the last video. I talked about the natural rate of unemployment. We're not going to get unemployment down to zero because we're still going to have some frictional unemployment. We're still going to have some structural unemployment. And so those things are going to be there. We can get cyclical unemployment down to zero. Then the economy's doing well. But we won't eliminate the unemployment. And remember, we said there's going to be an adjustment. And that's what you guys are going to start looking at. We're going to start putting together the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model, which you guys are already familiar with because we looked at economic growth and the long-run aggregate supply. But these are the gaps. This is when the economy is operating below its capacity. When it's operating below its capacity, it's not producing very much. When it's not producing very much, that's because we have workers that are unemployed. We have high unemployment in those periods, those recessionary periods. But if we have an expansionary period where the economy is overheating, and we've gotten too far, we're producing more than what we're capable of doing and sustaining in the long run, what we're going to find then is that unemployment's too low. And that low unemployment is going to put some upward pressure on wages, creating some inflation. So we'll come back, we'll talk about that when I get back in class. But for now, we want to understand the interpretation here of the unemployment rate and how that connects with the labor force participation rate. So if you guys look back at the worksheet you guys had, calculating unemployment worksheet, we want to just interpret a few. If you turn to number 5, we got a situation where it has Joel, who's been working as a waiter to pay his way through school. 2 months before receiving his degree in marketing, Joel quits his job to start looking for a job with an advertising company. Now, he is looking for work, and he doesn't have a job now. In what way is he unemployed? What type of unemployment is that? Is it structural, seasonal? It's frictional. Yeah, you guys got it. It's frictional because he's between jobs. He's between jobs. He quit one job to look for another because now that he's finished school, he expects that he can get a better job. And so he's looking for work. Now, what's happened to the labor force participation rate and the unemployment rate? Now, this is what's really important. And I think the best way to do these kind of problems and to try to kind of figure it out is to write down the ratio. Remember, the labor force participation rate is labor force divided by NIAP, the non-institutionalized adult population. And then write down the ratio that gives us the percentage of the unemployment rate. The number of unemployed divided by the labor force. Now, in this case, it's pretty easy. Okay, let's take a look there. I got that written there. Okay, labor force is not changed because he was a part of the labor force and he still is a part of the labor force. Nor has NIAP changed. So the labor force participation rate is unchanged in this case. Pretty easy one. Okay, but then over here with the unemployment rate, labor force, as we mentioned, did not change, but the number of unemployed did change. The number of unemployed went up. So when that number that's in the numerator increases, then the whole fraction is going to increase. So the unemployment rate in this case goes up. Now think about that. What does the media tell us? Hey, higher unemployment rate, that's bad. Is this necessarily a bad thing if this is what's led to the higher unemployment rate? That there are people that are graduating from school and looking for better, higher paying jobs? That's not necessarily a bad thing. And one of the things that can help us understand what the cause has been and what's happened there is if we look at what's happened to the labor force participation rate. Notice that the unemployment rate went up, but there's people are still out there looking for jobs. We know they're out there looking for jobs because the labor force participation rate has remained unchanged. And so that's going to help us understand what's going on with the unemployment rate a little bit better. Okay, let's try one more of those. Okay, let's get one down here. In fact, we're going to jump down to number 9 here. Okay, number 9 on there. There it is. Okay, you got number 9, John. Okay, John has been looking for a job for 8 months, but the economy seems to be getting worse with fewer and fewer available jobs. Discouraged, John stops looking for work since the job search seems futile. Now, like I said, what are we going to do? Let's go ahead and write that down. Labor force over NIAP. What happened to the labor force participation rate? Now, John's still part of NIAP. He's not institutionalized. He's an adult. Still part of NIAP. Now, could that change? Yeah. What if someone commits a crime, goes to prison, goes into a mental hospital? Those kinds of things would make someone institutionalized. Okay, so NIAP could change depending on the scenario that we spell out here. Did the labor force change? Yes. He was in the labor force. He was unemployed in the labor force looking for work, but then he stopped looking for work, which indicated that he wasn't willing. Remember, that's a tricky thing. That's what discouraged workers are a special category that we try to keep track of. So the labor force has gone down. It's gone down by 1. Now, remember there, we'll get that in there. Oh, hold on. Sorry. And there it is, labor force. Labor force has gone up by 1. That numerator, if it goes up, okay, that numerator goes up. Sorry, are you getting dizzy? I'm getting a little dizzy. There we go. If the labor force there goes up, then the labor force participation rate, and actually, I'm sorry, it didn't go up in this case because he quit looking for work. It went down. So the labor force participation rate has gone down. Okay, keep that in mind. Now, we want to know what's happened to the unemployment rate. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, and you got to really think about your math here. You got to think about how ratios work, how fractions work. Okay, so we got the unemployment rate there. Now, the number of unemployed, okay, oops, I covered it up here. Okay, the number of unemployed has gone down because he was unemployed, but now he stopped looking for work. So the number of unemployed has gone down, and the labor force has gone down. So let's get that back up there. I put a couple arrows there. Now notice this. Both the numerator and the denominator have gone down. If they've both gone down, what's happened to the fraction? Now some of you might say, well, hey, if they both went down, the fraction stays the same. But are you telling me that if we have the number 2/3 and 2 goes down by 1 and 3 goes down by 1, now we got 1/2, 2/3 equals 1/2? No, the fraction has changed. And what's important to remember here is this, that the number of unemployed is necessarily smaller than the labor force, because labor force is all of the employed plus all of the unemployed. So you've got a smaller number in the numerator, meaning that if it goes down by 1, it's a bigger percentage change than the percentage change in the labor force. So what that means then, if we do by percentage change, that's a bigger impact from the change in the number of unemployed. So what's going to happen overall? Overall, the unemployment rate is going to go down overall. Now, that's an interesting thing, because what do we say? The media goes, hey, unemployment's going down. Isn't that great? Sometimes unemployment goes down when we're at the very depths of a recession, because people give up and they stop looking. When we have discouraged workers, we may have the statistic, unemployment starts to go down. Now, how could we better interpret that? Instead of just saying, oh, unemployment going down is good, unemployment up is bad. Take a look at the labor force participation rate. The unemployment rate's going down, but the labor force participation rate has gone down because people have dropped out of the labor force. So we got to be careful when we try to interpret these statistics, and we got to understand them a little bit better. So good luck with those exercises there so that you can have a good interpretation.